Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka is largely an opinion talk show. All opinions, comments, or statements of fact expressed by Gwilda Wiyaka's guests are strictly their own and are not to be construed as those of the Science of Magic or endorsed in any manner by Gwilda Wiyaka, Relmar McConnell Media Company, its affiliated networks, stations, or employees. Welcome to the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, a program dedicated to uncovering the unified nature of reality and humanity's ever-evolving place as truly galactic beings. For more information on the Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, visit us online at www.thescienceofmagic.net.
Welcome to the Science of Magic, a place where science and magic come together to transform fact into evolving truth. We can be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. This hour we'll be exploring the path of power. There's a great deal of misunderstanding about what power really is and how one obtains it. For the most part, we tend to feel rather powerless, victims of circumstance or fate. We often mistake money for power or overpowering others as being powerful. We've been taught the only way to have power is to wrest it from or trick it out of someone else. So why do we want power in the first place? Most of us want power to obtain the things we want in life in order to be safe, provide for our families, and so on. In other words, we want the power to manifest. There are numerous steps on the path to power. First step is frequency. Personal power is directly related to frequency. The more frequency mobility we have, the more power. Reality is dictated by frequency. Whatever level of reality a person believes in or is subject to puts a frequency ceiling on the person and therefore their access to universal power. Faith or belief. If you don't believe in a thing, it cannot exist for you. Without belief, you cannot align with its frequency, so you don't have access to it. If we don't believe, we cannot imagine it. Which brings us to the next step, imagination. When we build something in our imagination, we're setting up an energy matrix at the quantum level around which a thing can become corporeal. Intention. We can imagine all we want, yet will not come to pass unless we empower it. All power is magical in nature. It begins in the occult or unseen quantum level and actually moves into the physical world through our physical bodies. The link between the physical and the quantum level is our chakra systems. Our chakras are driven by intent. In order to access and wield power, we must therefore learn to master ourselves. Conscious intention is the key. At first glance, this may seem simple, but it's amazing how much of our intent is out of our conscious control. Mostly we decide on solutions to perceived problems. These problems are usually illusionary, coming from our past experience or traumas rather than the present moment. For instance, what we think we may want is to be richly provided for. The next logical step is to intend to manifest a large amount of money. So we go out and buy a lottery ticket. In so doing, we are turning over our power to manifest to the lottery. We all know how well that works. This entire progression is driven by fear of lack rather than true desire. True desire. In order to manifest what we want, we need to accurately discern what that is. Follow your promptings. Once we've successfully moved through the labyrinth of perceived solutions and lack of faith, our manifestation doesn't just drop into our lap. We need to pay attention what's presenting itself in our world and ask ourselves, is this something that will lead to what I've intended? If it is, take the appropriate action. Power and manifestation are by their very nature a co-creation between the power of the universe and the ability of the individual to wield it. We're only as powerful as our ability to channel power. It's not something we possess, but rather something we tap into. It cannot be stolen from others. This is entirely an inside job. One of the many wonderful things about the world of power is the natural checks and balances that are in place. In order to access and wield power, we must have frequency mobility. Fear, hate, greed, and ill intent are all low frequency and therefore limit the amount of power that can be accessed and misused. You've got to love the way life works. In order to become masterful in accessing and wielding of power, we need a skill set enabling us to overcome the numerous pitfalls and help direct our intent. This is where magical practices come in, from Wicca and witchcraft to shamanism. There are many practices whose original purpose was the accessing and reasonable wielding of universal power at the quantum level. Our guest this hour is Devin Hunter, author of Witch's Book of Power. He holds third-degree initiations in both Northern Star tradition of Wicca as well as Dianic Tradition of Witchcraft, and is the founder of his own tradition, Sacred Fires. Devin's podcast is The Modern Witch helps his global audience develop their magical abilities. After this short break, I'll introduce Devin, and together we will delve into the many faces of spiritual power, how to access it, and responsibly wield it. You're listening to The Science of Magic. Prior innovative episodes can always be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State-certified occupational school training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, dedicated to unification and evolution of consciousness. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Devin Hunter, author of The Witch's Book of Power. His website, www.devinhunter.net. Devin, thank you so much for joining us on The Science of Magic.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm really excited.
Yeah, we should have fun here. So we all start on the same page. Would you mind defining witchcraft for us?
Oh, sure. And one of the things I like to talk about, especially in the book, is that witchcraft is something different for everybody. And so for me, witchcraft is really a set of tools to help us empower ourselves. I believe that if you have the ability to do better for yourself, then you have the spiritual obligation to do so. And I use witchcraft to help manifest those things and make that happen.
So what would you outline what you're referring to as witch power?
Sure. So the witch power is something that we've been talking a lot about in the occult for a really long time. It's the belief that there is something that makes witches a little different, makes us attracted to what we call the preternatural. It makes us kind of aware that there are other influences, there are other energies around us. And for me, I came into witchcraft really as a psychic. So my first interactions with anything spiritual really came at a very young age, and I was a medium. I was a little boy, and I was very confused and very scared. And I was really lucky to have a mother who was super supportive, and she asked me questions, and she really encouraged the process that I was exploring and going through. Because of that, I got my feet wet really with psychic development first, and that's where I kind of made myself comfortable for a very, very long time, and then dipped into witchcraft as a teenager, looking for answers, looking for things to help explain some of the experiences I was having. And it really seemed to me that at the time, witchcraft was the only set of knowledge that had what I was looking for. So I just developed my own kind of practice, and then, started studying with some of these other larger groups. And eventually, it led me to the point where I started looking at the things that we had in common as witches and psychics, and the practices. And a lot of people, if you've ever dabbled in witchcraft, or if you ever have, gone down that rabbit hole, what you might have noticed is there's a lot of psychic development that comes with witchcraft. And so one of the things that I thought was kind of a disadvantage for the witchcraft community were that these practices were being written about and developed specifically by witches and not by people who were psychics and not professional psychics. And as a professional psychic, I've been reading people and working with people for over 13 years now professionally. It's my 100% full-time job. What I've realized is that any of us who have the ability to kind of perceive the other senses, perceive the other things that are going on around us, we're here to help people. We're here to help get them to wherever they need to be. We're here to help ourselves. It's all included. It's all part of the process. And so the witch power is, for me, it's just as much of something that's natural to us as maybe a psychic ability would be. In fact, if you look at parapsychology and we kind of look at psychic development and psychic abilities through that lens, what you'd find is that when we start talking about psychokinesis and telekinesis, it's the ability to affect an environment without physically touching it. And so when I started studying the parapsychology with one of the best leading researchers in the country, his name's Lloyd Auerbach, he's an amazing guy. He's been on all the shows, he's done all the things. And I asked him, I said, well, I'm a witch, and I've been practicing this for a very long time, and so you're telling me that telekinesis and psychokinesis is this thing, but that's what we've been doing for thousands of years. Is it the same thing? And he said, well, if we're going to say somebody who's doing a Reiki session on another person is performing an act of telekinesis or psychokinesis because they're affecting that person's internal environment without touching it, then why wouldn't witchcraft be considered that? And that process really clicked a lot of things for me, and it allowed me to really blend the work that I had done as a professional psychic, helping people help themselves, and the work that I found as a witch and my spirituality. Being able to combine those two things is really what inspired the Witch's Book of Power, and helping people to identify what the witch power is inside of them, so meaning what type of psychic abilities do you naturally come with, and being able to really develop those. And there's a lot more to it, of course, and I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to talk about it. But developing those natural gifts that you already have as the first point of looking for your power, because often, as you know, people who are energetically sensitive, people who are doing this type of work, we tend to get overwhelmed easily. We tend to put other people's needs ahead of ourselves, and over a lifetime of being a caregiver who's kind of, always, you got these sociopaths that kind of go looking for the sweet, kind people who are going to take care of them. We have a lifetime of that, and it's very disempowering as somebody who comes into the world naturally gifted, naturally sensitive. And so I wrote this book, hopefully, with the intention that we would help people actually find their witch power, develop it, and discover it so that they could get out of whatever situation they needed to in life. They could use their natural abilities. It's not you being sensitive is not your Achilles heel, it's your superpower. And this book is all about taking that Achilles heel that, is often used against us and turning it into something that doesn't just benefit us, but benefits the world.
So am I hearing you say that some people are born with the ability to access witch power, but some are not?
Yeah, so this is one of the other things that we've been talking a lot about. And in, the origin of the witch power, it kind of depends on where you come from. Some of us believe that there were, if we think of the Bible, we talk about the Nephilim, and the idea that angels were mixing with mankind, and from there you have this kind of tainted human bloodline that we got energies and access to things that we weren't supposed to. And so there's a school of thought that believes that we come from that all psychics and all witches, anybody who has any sort of those spiritual abilities, we're somehow gifted with these abilities because we have angels in our bloodline. So that's one of the beliefs. There's another belief that comes out of Europe, specifically northeastern Europe, that witches and people who are psychics are fae-touched. So their ancestors actually have some sort of fairy blood inside of them. And then I know people who are, they're genetic witches, so their mother was a witch, their mother's mother was a witch. They were taught that by an adopted aunt, so their family line ended up kind of absorbing this magical tradition from somebody else. And then we also have the idea that if you're not born with it, but you are somebody who is attracted to it, well, there's still something there. There's still a reason you have the power. So one of the beliefs is that it comes from past lives, that if you lived a life where you were a spiritually powerful person, that will come up and develop itself like any other thing in this life as well. So that's another way that you can get the witch power. Another way that we talk a lot about is through initiation. And so that's working with the tradition. Like with me, I studied Northern Star Wicca. I studied the cult of Diana, the Dianic Witchcraft. Right now I'm studying the fairy tradition. So you can get initiated, and when you get initiated, the idea is that the current of energy that those witches are working with gets implanted almost supplementally into your own energy body. So you now have access to whatever energy current. It's a lot like getting a Reiki attunement. You get attuned, and then suddenly you have access to this universal life force that you can use as the practitioner. And so the witch power doesn't have to be something that you're born with. For a lot of us, it is. It is definitely something that you can go and seek out, and you can kind of attune yourself to it. That's very, very much so possible.
So when I was training early on in shamanism, my original teacher did an activation on me on the 3 cauldrons of the soul, or the 3 energy centers in the body. Is this the sort of activation you're talking about? And he did say that I came with this in me. He just had to activate it. Is this what you're talking about?
Absolutely. So in the book, there are 3 chapters that are dedicated to what we call the 3 souls. And the 3 souls are very much so that 3 cauldron system. In fact, that's actually how I learned it first, was the 3 cauldrons as well. And the 3 cauldrons, or the 3 souls, are a lot like the chakra system. And if we study Egyptian chakras, there's 72 chakras. In some parts of it, there are like 480-something chakras. Mostly in the Western world, we accept that there are 7. Sometimes 21, depending on what tradition you're in. And those are all just, yes, chakras are energy points in the body, and yes, we can really divide those into, all of their many parts. But when we're looking at things from the 3 soul system, it's a lot like the chakras, but instead of there being 7, there are 3. And for me, I really like this. I do a lot of Reiki healing. I do a lot of work with the chakras, so I totally understand the importance of those. When we take it to a 3 soul model, however, what we get is that what I talk a lot about with my students is it's almost as if we think of the primal soul. So there are 3 parts of the soul: the primal, the ego, and the higher. And the primal soul is going to really be your root and your sacral chakras. Okay, so you want to combine those chakras. That kind of makes your primal soul. The ego is going to be your solar plexus, your heart chakra, and your throat chakra. And then the higher self is going to be your third eye and your crown chakras. And so you can take those and kind of overlap them and see where, especially with like when we think of the root chakra and the sacral chakra, they have a lot in common. And so we think of the primal self as being the part of you that comes from the earth. It's the animal that your ego kind of inhabits. And this is a part of us that's concerned with sleeping and eating and finding shelter and making love and procreating. And it can't communicate to us. It can't say anything because it's an animal, right? So it's not going to be able to say, I'm angry today. It's just going to communicate to us through feelings and impulses. I'm hungry. I'm angry, or I got hurt, those types of things. And so all we can really do is communicate through it and try to understand it through our animal impulses, our animal instincts. The ego wants to make sense of everything. It's constantly in a place of formulating and kind of constructing the universe around us. We talk a lot about frequency in my book, so I was so happy when I heard your introduction, because this is really the idea of the parts that create our frequency, okay? So the ego is constantly building, it's constantly working at constructing the universe that you live in and how you perceive the universe. And then we have the higher self, which is really that spark of God. It doesn't matter what you call God, it doesn't matter, what name you're using. When we're talking about this, we're talking about source. So for me, I refer to it as the energy, or the star goddess, which is the universe itself. And so the universe, we believe in my tradition, is the goddess. Like the actual universe, the stars, the space in between, all of it. It's the universe, and it is the goddess. And our job as people who are aligning ourselves, our job as people who are looking to find our frequency, is to harmonize and commune with that. And we believe that happens through ecstasy or through shamanic exploration. So when we put it all together, we've got these 3 parts of the soul that makes one soul. And when we think of it as, when we really get into parapsychology, hauntings, all of that kind of interesting stuff.
Right.
We think of the primal soul really being like residual hauntings, where there's a memory that's been kind of placed within an area that kind of is played on loop over and over again.
Devin, we're going to have to take a commercial break here, but I want to pick up with hauntings and frequency on the other side. We'll return to our discussion after this short break. You're listening to The Science of Magic. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Want to hear more? Previous broadcasts of innovative episodes can always be found on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State-certified occupational school, training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, a place where magic and science come together to promote enlightenment. Visit us online at www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is Devin Hunter, author of The Witch's Book of Power. His website, www.devinhunter.net. Devin, we were playing with the three cauldrons of the soul, or the three souls, and it's my understanding that we have a chakra system, and everybody has a different idea how many we have, but aren't these three cauldrons run off of the chakra system and then organized into three particular parts?
It really depends on what spiritual tradition you're approaching it from. Not all of the traditions actually accept the Eastern chakra system. And so when we think of the three cauldrons, they actually originated as a separate entity. It was later on that they were, because people are seeing the similarities, and they're saying, wait a minute. And so they can be thought of as separate. I tend to like the way that you think of them. I like to think of them as really just kind of part of the chakra system, just a little more, evolved.
How do you see these three cauldrons as, I actually see them as looking very much like a toroidal field. Are you familiar with that? And do you see them the same way?
I do. I use a lot of, we approach it in multiple ways. And in the book, I share what we do in Sacred Fires, or our approach in Sacred Fires. And that is to work with the three souls as both totemic energies, so we think of working with serpent and spider and owl a lot to help us understand how these three parts of our souls fit together. But we also look at them, and when we're visualizing them, we use a lot of celestial imagery. So we use the Merkaba a lot. We use the idea of our, especially our higher soul, being this fifth dimensional kind of thing that's forced into this material world. And so we use a lot of that type of imagery, absolutely.
You know what? The other thing I've noticed, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like when I'm working with the three cauldrons, then when I get them up and running, then that increases my auric field. So it's like the auric field itself and all the layers thereof run off of the three cauldrons and those that are wired like we are. Have you seen that?
Absolutely. And actually, in the book, we talk a lot about that, and that's part of the idea of what we call the home frequency. And your home frequency is the state of being that you are in when you are perfectly aligned. When those three souls are aligned, that they're working together, you're channeling not just the energy of God, but you're channeling the energy of the earth below you. And when we put all of those pieces together, when you're not feeling threatened, when you're not having a moment of dis-ease, all of those things, you feel very powerful. Your auric energy totally expands. And we call that our home frequency, or we refer to it, we think of it as a practice, as what we call igniting the holy fire. And so that burst of energy you feel in your aura, we refer to as our holy fire.
Got it. So what I find is when I'm really aligned that way, even if I'm half asleep or sleeping, that's when information really starts pouring through me based on what it is I'm supposed to be bringing forward information-wise into teaching or this or that. Have you found that?
Absolutely. And for us, it's actually a quintessential practice. So we start our day by going to our home frequency. We end our day by going to our home frequency. Anybody who might be familiar with the work of Esther and Jerry Hicks, they talk a lot about the vortex and starting your day and ending your day in the vortex. It's a very similar idea. The belief is that if you are able to start your day in a place of alignment, in a place of being a solid being with your holy fire ignited, that you will be able to move throughout your day, tackle anything that comes your way, and still be in a place of power, still be in the place of sovereignty and authority over your own existence. And then we end our day in the same way. And so we also do this, if we're going to do any practices for people, I do it before I go into sessions with people. It's something that I would say we're aligning our souls probably 2 or 3 times a day. And it's not always a giant ritualistic process. Sometimes it's just us going and away for a couple minutes and taking a few deep breaths and getting that energy going. But it is something that for us is imperative if you're going to be psychically sensitive, if you're going to be doing that work. And the reason we do that isn't just because we get this boost of power, but it also helps us to defend ourselves. It helps us to be in a place where we don't have to worry about our weaknesses being taken advantage of by the psychic energies that we're interacting with.
So shamanically speaking, this is creating sacred space and then carrying it around with you. So if I'm working with someone, like we're working right now, I tend to extend my field out to enfold the situation. Do you train in that as well?
Absolutely, yeah. We do a lot of work in Sacred Fires with psychic development as a spiritual practice, and so it isn't so clinical all the time. And for us, like I said, the idea of establishing the correct type of energy field before we do that work is absolutely imperative to the work.
So are there guidelines in witchcraft about responsibly wielding the power that you're accessing?
There are guidelines. Not all of them are accepted. So if we hear, I'm not a follower of the threefold law. That was something that we kind of, those of us who are modern practitioners and doing it professionally, who have to answer all kinds of weird questions, we had to do a lot of research. And I think what most of us has found is that the threefold law didn't exist until the 60s. So, there is no historical precedence for it before that. So it was really something that we kind of realized was very important at the time. It helped us, if you have the leaders of witchcraft saying, oh no, we're not going to hurt anybody because we're going to get all the energy back 3 times, then of course it's going to help with the public image. For me, it's a lot about being a responsible person. It's about, I always say ethics are relative, but standards must always be maintained, and that's because I did a lot of work in college with ethics and the idea of ethics and where those place into the human experience. And we always know that ethics are going to change. We may not consider ourselves to be somebody who's aggressive, but if you're threatened or if your child is threatened, of course that bear energy is going to come out of you, And so we try very hard to always be in a place where we can make sure that those things won't get the best of us. And for us, we find it very important to be the practitioners who realize that it's up to us. If we do something wrong, if we do something that we feel is not in alignment with ourselves, the only person who's really going to suffer is us. And so we always have to constantly be striving to be at the peak of our excellence, both as people, but also as witches and practitioners. And so for us, the container comes from doing a lot of deep personal work, which is why shamanism is such a big part of the work that I do. Because in shamanism, unlike with a lot of just kind of standard traditional witchcraft or psychic development, there's a huge emphasis placed on working through your issues, working through the baggage that you carry in this life, maybe from other lives, all of those things, and how those things affect your frequency, and the importance of being able to move through them and work through them. And that's what the book is all about. So throughout the entire book, it's all about picking through those things, understanding yourself more, understanding what magic you can do to help get you there faster, and being in a place where you can really work with your frequency so that you get total power over your life. And that's not easy to do, especially if you're sensitive.
So the checks and balances I spoke of earlier, you guys really see that as a part of it. In other words, if we're unprocessed, we have less mobility, we have less access to power. Through the process of becoming processed, we kind of shed the stuff that would have us misusing it in the first place as we gain power. Is that what you're talking about?
Absolutely.
I love those checks and balances.
Yeah, there's actually. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go right ahead.
There's a chapter in the book called "The Crown and Pentacle of Sovereignty," and that is a practice that we developed really early on in Sacred Fires to help us. It's really a psychic diagnostic tool, and it's used to help us make sure that we are in a place of sovereignty. And for us, that means that we're balanced, that we are respecting others, but we're also expecting respect in return. That we are aware of our impact on life, but also on other people's impact on our lives. We're looking for divinity, meaning are we doing something in the name of the divine, and is it really in the name of the divine, or is it in the name of your divine? Being aware of those things. And so for us, that then translates. There's this beautiful exercise in the book where we run this energy diagnostic, and then actually flip it around energetically and wear it as the crown. So we think of, everyone's always saying, oh, wear your invisible crown. Well, for us, we take that very seriously. And so we actually use that psychic diagnostic tool that helps us to balance ourselves with all of the power that we're working with and we're seeking, so that we don't fall into those traditional traps. Absolute power can absolutely corrupt you, but you can also corrupt the things that you choose it to. And so if you're somebody who's moving into this work, really trying to become powerful and release the things that have made you feel disempowered, then you're going to really be doing a lot of personal work. It isn't going to be about the spells necessarily. It's going to be about those things that we find beyond the spell work.
It's going to work you. We're going to have to take another break. We will be back on the flip side of this short break. You're listening to The Science of Magic, the place where altruistic professionals of science and the esoteric create common ground for the betterment of our world. You can always listen to previous broadcasts on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. The scientist and the mystic have been on an age-old, relentless search with one thing in common. They seek truth. Their paths converge in the 40,000-year-old practice of shamanism, an ancient science delving to the quantum level of life, facilitating healing, manifestation, and evolution. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, the founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Arts School, a unique Colorado State-certified occupational school, training shamanic practitioners and teachers. We also provide classes for empowering personal lives through shamanism. Our certification classes are in week-long segments enabling international participation, and online classes and long-distance shamanic healing sessions are available. Come discover the science of magic in the limitless world of shamanism. www.findyourpathhome.com. Welcome back. This is The Science of Magic, bringing together gifted people of service to our world. Our website is www.thescienceofmagic.net. I'm your host, Gwilda Wiyaka. Our guest this hour is DEVIN Hunter, author of The Witch's Book of Power. His website, www.llewellyn.com. DEVIN, we were just talking about the crown, and what I'm just really fascinated by this, because what my Lakota teacher taught me is that once we get that crown soul working, and you turn it upside down, turn it right side up, in other words, you actually have access to different stellar knowledge. Is that your understanding?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. There's a lot of knowledge that's hidden up there. We just have to do the work to get it.
Do you see that as coming through in light form?
Yeah, absolutely. That's most of the when we think of visualizing that process or seeing it in the mind's eye. It's, I think just about all of us really see it as light, at least in my tradition.
That's the same in a lot of shamanic traditions as well, at least the ancient ones. The more modern that are more ritualistic based kind of pass over that part.
Right.
Do you see us as coming into a time where there's more light available? And if so, how's that affecting all of this?
I do, and I think that's one of the reasons why the book was so kind of wonderfully timed in my life and the work that I do with people. I primarily spend, I would say, a good third of my week just working with clients, helping them through issues in life. And I feel like there's a lot of people who are being called right now, or kind of being woken up to the idea that there is something extra out there, and we don't have to be in a place of fear. We can go embrace that light. And so there's a lot of new work that's available. For about 10 years, there wasn't a whole lot of new stuff coming out, and now there's all this really great new spiritual technology that we have access to. So I think that is in part because there is this call, and I think that it's in part because people are being inspired to go and create these technologies or go and look for them. And because of that, I think the world is changing very drastically. And I think that we're going to experience something kind of similar to the surge and interest in spirituality that we did in the late 80s and 90s. I think we're about to experience something very similar to that.
There's a lot of talk out there that actually what we might be looking at is a major change in the human brain, almost as drastic as what happened when we went from one lobe to two lobes. Are you familiar with that at all?
I am, yeah. I think there's a lot. I think there's a lot of changes that we are seeing. I think that we're seeing obviously that a lot more people are being born, somewhere on the autism scale. I think that we're seeing people, a lot more indigo babies that are being born, which of course is definitely connected to autism. So I think that we are evolving, and I think that we are in a place where we're growing, and I think that it is going to look a lot like that,
Yeah, it's just amazing, and I don't think we have any idea how exciting it's going to be as we start to shift as a race. It's happened before; it's going to happen in the near future, I'm thinking. I'm fascinated by the concept of personal power, star power, and allied power. Would you please go into those a little bit again?
Sure. So personal power really those are the three parts of the book, and the first part, so the personal power, is all about working with your own psychic abilities and working with the idea of getting power in your life. So how can we take your sensitivities, your three souls, and get everything working in a way that's going to give you a lot more wisdom in your day-to-day and gnosis in your day-to-day that ultimately yields power. Star power refers to, and that's probably the biggest section in the book, and it's actually all about the astrology of life. And so looking at your birth chart, we can actually figure out the complex cocktail that kind of created you. There's a lot of wisdom that can be yielded in that, such as, what things you're going to be really strong at, things you're not going to be strong at. And then from a spiritual perspective, what types of development and practices would be best for you as somebody who has Scorpio rising. So there's 20,000 words in the middle of the book that is just reference for people to be able to look up their own information and help piece together who they are and what they are and profile themselves. And the allied power section is all about working with the spirit world. So working with, again, who I refer to as the star goddess, or working with the universe as a spiritual being, and then working with who we refer to as the gods of witchcraft, which for us are Diana and Dianus and Aradia. Those are the gods we work with a lot. And then moving in further into the idea of working with spirit allies, not just totems and things like that, but working with your spirit guides. And that's really, I'm a professional medium. That's actually most of the work that I do. And the work with the allied part was very inspired by my personal experiences and my personal work, and actually inspired me to write the second book, which is at Llewellyn right now, getting edited. So as a follow-up, which is the Witch's Book of Spirits.
Well, we're going to have to do this again when that comes up.
I would love to. But you put all those three parts together, and we get a roadmap to help you as an individual really take your crown back in life, really take your sovereignty and your power back. And that's why I wrote the book.
That's wonderful. What advice can you offer our listeners that are interested in entering into the process of accessing power?
It's difficult, but it's totally worth it. And the spoils far outweigh the costs of the war. And so it's not everybody's going to do it because it is difficult. And a lot of us are who are sensitive. We're not followers. We're kind of independent, black sheep type people. And this is the work for us. This is not the work for people who follow blindly. This is the work for people who challenge things and question things and want to know how they fit into the world versus having somebody tell them what they should do to fit into the world.
Haven't you seen the path to power is as individual as the individual, like there's no two alike?
Oh, absolutely. I'm a big believer in the old, there's an old Indian saying that there are 1,000 paths up the mountain, and the only one wrong way is the way where there's the guy standing telling you this is how you do it. So I firmly believe that it's a very personal thing, and I think that that's the nature of the universe itself, is to put us in these personal situations so that the universe itself can figure out what it is and who and what's going on. So I think that we're in process. I think God is in process, and I think that witchcraft is the connection there.
How is witchcraft different from Wicca?
Wicca is an actual religion. It's an actual tradition unto itself that was really created by Gerald Gardner. Before that, nothing was called Wicca. But there was always been witchcraft, and every culture has its own form of witchcraft. And so, and again, that's why you have to kind of define witchcraft for yourself. But we look at Wicca as a specific religion, and there are a lot of people who are inspired by that religion, but didn't go through a traditional training process. They're still considered Wiccan. We often refer to them as Neo-Wiccans, because they're not aligned to a specific traditional path that is connected to that root of where Wicca comes from. But witchcraft has been going on since the dawn of humanity. All the way, we can go all the way back to Samaria and see how that, where the Jews were mixing in with people and magic and things. Very fascinating stuff. So there is a difference. Wicca is very earth-based. Witchcraft is not necessarily earth-based. Witchcraft tends to be soul-based and celestial-based.
Well, before we're out of time, would you mind telling our listeners where they can find your books?
Yeah, you can find it at any of your local booksellers. You can go to Amazon. You can go to Barnes & Noble. You can also, which I highly recommend, going to your local spiritual supply store because they will be able to carry it. You can go to my website, devinhunter.net, or you can pretty much get it anywhere right now.
That's good news. So you work personally with people. Are you able to work long distance?
I do, yeah. I see people through Skype, and I do phone sessions. And I see people all over the world. So like this weekend, I was just talking to somebody in Italy, Australia, and Germany. So I definitely, anywhere in the world I can, if you want to get a hold of me, I can find a way.
So they just get a hold of you on your website in order to engage your services?
Absolutely, devinhunter.net.
Devin, it has been absolutely wonderful working with you. I can't thank you enough for being on the show.
No, thanks for having me.
This has been The Science of Magic. Remember, you can always listen to past thought-provoking episodes on our website, www.thescienceofmagic.net. Until next time, dear ones, may you be blessed with knowledge, comforted with love as you access your personal power.
One people, one nation, searching through the night. One people, one nation, searching for